Hello guys, this is Kolpo. We are going to look at chapter 1 of our SSC Biology, Lessons in Life. Firstly, we are going to look into the living world, and basically the living world is put into two parts, first being the Super Kingdom 1 and the Super Kingdom 2. The basis of the two parts is mainly based on prokaryotes and eukaryotes. For prokaryotes, we mainly mean organisms that don't have a membrane-bound nucleus mainly. Whereas for eukaryotes, we have a proper well-structured nucleus with a membrane-bound nucleus. For our Super Kingdom 1, we're going to look at the type which is called Monera, and the Super Kingdom 2 is broken down into four parts: Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. We're going to look at each one of these parts. Alright, so first we're going to look at Monera, which their main material for the filament is chromatin, which is arranged vertically, and they, as prokaryotes, they don't have a nuclear membrane, and they do their division by binary fission. They absorb their nutrition mainly by absorption and photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is only for those that have chloroplast inbuilt in them. A good example of that would be a bacteria. Next, we move on to our Super Kingdom, and there are four types: are Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Let's move on to Protista at first. These are mainly uni or could be multicellular organisms. They take their nutrition by absorption, ingestion, or photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is only applicable in the presence of chloroplast. And the type of reproduction it's whether by mitosis or by conjugation. They have no embryo. A good example for that would be an amoeba, which is a single cell organism. Let's move on to fungi next. The main feature, one of the most important features about fungi, is that their cell wall is made up of very distinct chitin, and they take their nutrition in by absorption. They do their reproduction by haploid spores, and they do the cell division by mitosis as well. A good example of that would be an yeast, which is usually used in bread. Let's move on to the next part, Plantae. Mainly for Plantae, they are the only organisms out of all of this that have their main production of food by photosynthesis. They have well-developed embryos. A good example for that would be our green plants. Alright, moving on to Animalia. These are mainly multicellular organisms, and a very interesting thing about them is that they have no cell walls. And also they are heterotrophs. That means they take their energy or the nutrition in from the other sources. And lastly, they reproduce sexually. A good example of that would be humans. Okay, we have looked at our two different kingdoms. Now we move on to classifying organisms. That is very important because we have to understand, in order for us to specify different organisms, we would need a good name for them, which is unique to each one. So in order for us to do that, we'd have to look at the steps of the classification. Firstly, we would look at the kingdom, which derives from here. Then we'd look at the phylum, then the class, then the order, the family, the genus, and the species. The most important while naming an organism is this two, which is our genus and species. We'd have to look at these 8 rules before we can do that. Firstly would be, they would have to be named in Latin. There would be usually mainly two parts, one being the genus and the other being the species. The third rule, which is very important, that each organism has to have its own name and it has to be unique to it. Third, the first name the genus basically would start with the capital letter, follow up with all the small letters. Whereas for the second word, which is the species, all of the letters would be small. For the fifth rule, we would have all of them written down in italic, and for the sixth, each one would be underlined. For the seventh rule, in the case if multiple scientists discovered the animal, the legitimate name given by the first scientist would be considered. And the last and the final rule is that scientists can have his or her name cited at the end of the name. Okay, now let's look at some of the names that are important for your MCQ and for your written exams as well. Firstly, we would have to memorize these general names and the scientific names. Each one of these are very important. I would want you guys to write them down in your copy and memorize each one of the scientific names. That would be very helpful for your MCQ. Alright, the binomial nomenclature is the scientific name of any animal under the binomial nomenclature should be accorded with the declared principles of the ICBN, which is International Codes of Botanical Nomenclature, and ICZN, which is the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature. Alright, the main important points for chapter 1 that is important for your exams are these two parts, and each one of these parts along with this description is very important for you to remember. Everything including the prokaryotes, the differences between the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes is very important. Steps of classification is equally as important, and you have to memorize the order and also the rules. The binomial nomenclature, the 8 of them, all of them have to be memorized along with the general names and the scientific names given on the board. That is all for today. Thank you very much.